Ty is a creative, my husband, but I don't know.
What makes Ty a creative and not you?
Because I don't channel it in any specific place because my creativity flows and blows where I blow and flow.
And so you're still creative though. I don't think that makes you any less of a creative.
I just don't have a name. I don't have a definition. I don't have, it's not defined for me. So I don't, and it's just like Lovecraft Country. Until I can name myself, it doesn't matter yet. And
Hippolyta! Hey y'all, and welcome back to the Books We Should Have Read podcast. My name is Ashley Ray, and I'm a writer and producer on a mission to get adults who typically aren't into reading through the exploration of Black literary classics. This pod is an extension to the BWSR Book Club, which is currently reading classics surrounding relationships and magic, and you can find our complete book list for this collection at booksweshouldhaveread.com. Tune in each episode as I discuss a classic from the reading list with a member of my tribe, from what we love to what we hate about it, but ultimately as we rave about why each one of these books is a book we all must read. Today, we'll be talking about our second read in this collection, Beloved by Toni Morrison, with one of the dopest people I know, Morghan Williams Boydston.
Why did you want me to do this with you? That'll help me know what you want me to say.
Okay, what I'm going to say regardless, well, in addition to what you tell me to say about you, I'm going to tell people that you're one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my whole entire life. I love talking to you, and I just you are the reason why I went ahead and was just like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking read Beloved.
Okay. I'm the Human Services Manager for Washtenaw County through the Office of Community and Economic Development.
What does that mean, Morghan?
So what that means, in normal times, non-pandemic times, I oversee about $10 million worth of state and federal resources that go out to community to address homelessness, the aging population, food insecurity, immigration, unmet needs funds. I basically, all the things that you hear about, well, not all of it, because DHHS is its own office, and certain places are its own office, but a lot of the resources you hear about going out through communities in order to support those that are in poverty come through my office and through my portfolio.
But you're also, in addition to that, because that is very important, but you're also super fucking creative and cool and fly as fuck, and you read weird books, and
I do. I like thoughts
your
of weird
ancestors.
things.
Say all that.
Oh yeah, ancestor cluster printing.
So in this section, I'm supposed to be summarizing what Beloved is about, but I find it really hard to do so. So in my notes, I wrote that it's a story ultimately about magic and resilience. But I feel like that also does this amazing story such a disservice. It was inspired by the story of Margaret Garner, who was a young mother who escaped slavery, but was captured and then arrested for killing one of her children, while also in the midst of trying to kill the others. When Toni Morrison found the story, she wanted to pay homage to this brave woman and, as quote, relating her story to contemporary issues about freedom, responsibility, and a woman's place. And so Beloved, the novel, follows those same themes and is centered around a young mother named Seath, who also escaped slavery in an effort to save her own and her children's lives. And then after escaping slavery, she ends up killing one of her own children to prevent them from going back to the plantation as well. Through Seath, we are introduced to a myriad of characters, some of whom share her direct experience with living on a plantation called Sweet Home, and two of those characters being her daughters, one of whom she's pregnant with while escaping slavery, and the other who she ends up killing in order to prevent them from going back to the plantation. It's later known as Beloved. I had never read Beloved because I was so traumatized by that crazy ass 90s movie in which was an adaptation of this novel. I was always curious about the book because when I would listen to other people talk about it, they made it seem as though it was way more magical than anything else. And Morghan agreed. This was my first time going into it, but Morghan has read this book at least 3 times. This time, however, when reading, she made sure to look for the magic within, and I honestly encourage everyone to do the same. Just as last episode, we will jump around a lot when talking about this novel, and so if you're sensitive to spoilers, you may want to read it before continuing to listen. I almost didn't read this. I almost stopped within the first couple of chapters and text you and was just like, I can't stomach it.
Why?
And it's because of course I was never a slave, right?
Sure.
And so everything that I learned about slavery, I've been able to in my head, it's this, I have this fairy tale view of slaves. They were these really good people who were stolen from their land and then put in this place, this foreign place where they were forced to build. And in real life, they are extremely complicated. And just as people just are complicated. And I guess I was trying to, would I call it respectability politics? Kinda, not really. So you know how we try to justify why Black people should be treated equally?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to draw the connection. So we try to
Okay.
justify why Black people should be treated equally, and a lot of times we end up using respectability politics to do that.
Yeah.
I was
Yes.
kind of doing that with slavery.
And why the slaves should be treated equally is if they did all the things that they were supposed to do as a slave, and then they have a right to be free. Like, what's the
They're really good people and they didn't deserve to be treated like that because they were really good people. Not just because they were human beings. It should just be human, but they were
Okay.
good. My ancestors were really good people is what
Got
I
you.
guess I taught myself or told myself for years. And so reading this, it fucked me up in the beginning.
Ah.
I
Okay.
was just like, wow, none of
Okay.
this shit is true. It's when I guess the main parts when they were fucking the calves,
Yeah.
it really was just why would they do that? Ill, why? Ill, it's so
Also, some
gross.
judgment popped up. Some things in
Very
your
much
mind.
so.
Okay.
Oh
Okay.
my God, that's so barbaric. But I was taught I'm never supposed to use that term when I'm describing a slave. I use that term when I'm describing the act of slavery, but I never
Right.
use that term when I'm describing a enslaved person's acts. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. It makes all the sense.
And it was just wow, it was just a lot. Anyway, I almost didn't finish it though, but something told me to keep pushing on, and I'm so happy I did. Because this is honestly one of the best books I think I've ever read in my whole entire life.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I've read
Okay.
a lot of books,
Okay.
and this is up there. But okay,
Dope.
do you have any initial thoughts?
I think there's a couple of things. So this book. Okay, I'm trying to because as I was reading it, I was trying to figure out exactly what I was getting from the book and what I was being moved by in the book. Um, because I've read it multiple times now, I think this time I think at one point I probably read it through those eyes and was like, what's happening? Probably that's why the first time I picked it up and flipped through it, I never really finished it for that reason. And after seeing the movie too, I was like, yeah, I feel like I know this story. And I literally did know the story from a historical context. I knew of the woman that killed her children, right? And so
Yeah.
for me, though, whenever I've heard stories of slaves that did violent acts in order to protect themselves or to not have to undergo whatever unknown thing, which we now know is horrible and violent in and of itself, But whenever I hear of acts when slaves did things in order not to have to go through that, I actually say more power to them. I am empowered by that choice. And I remember learning the story about her it being a little girl, and I was like, man, I think I'd kill my kids too. Like if I knew they got free and I had these days, and this is before I ever read the book and before I ever saw the movie, but just learning about the story, I never blamed her. I never blamed her. And so then I never really blame it. For me, this allows like one of the first opportunities to read a book in which we hear about the atrocities of what people have done from the people that did them and not necessarily from the people telling the story about what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so the light, it feels like the voice of this. How dare I judge them more than what they've judged of themselves? I can't punish them any more than each of these characters have punished themselves. And they've all done a very good job in punishing themselves in this story. So I think I kind of read it always from an anthropological viewpoint of like, let's just observe and see what this culture, this strange culture would be like. And I think what always throws me off is that in doing that, I realized that it ain't a strange culture. It actually is not very different from the culture today. It's just in a different time with different amount of resources and different types of choices.
And different laws.
And different law. Yep.
So I wish I read it like you because.
Well, this is 3 times in though. Let's be clear. This is not like.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I think the next time I read it, because I will read it again, I'm going to try my hardest to read it through that lens because I'm just so emotionally driven. Like when I'm reading, I need to attach myself to a character.
Yeah.
And I did that with Seath and it broke my fucking heart.
Oh.
And I did that with Beloved and it broke my fucking heart, like both of them. That's why I said like this is like about a family. Like it's just all super complicated. They're all complicated. Like what I did, so when the last Toni Morrison book that I talked about was Sula, and
I love Sula.
It's so good. And we were able to walk through it from beginning to end, but because this is written the way it is, I don't think
there is no beginning or end. It's like all wrapped up.
Yeah, it really
is. In her psychotic break the whole time.
Like for real.
So this go round, I read it and then I also looked up some of the analysis of it. Yeah. And so having done that and seeing it, and I know that same work had to have happened in the class that I took, but I don't know, just you grow up and you understand things a little differently. I would say that based off of what you put in that text, the main characters individually make sense only because it really is, after reading someone else's analysis, it pulls some things together for me and made me think about some things that while our protagonist is like the central focus, she really actually isn't. Everybody else has equal amount of times, but the way that Toni Morrison writes, you can't tell who's talking at what time. I think that's the thing.
Yeah, and I also text you that right before I started reading part 3.
Okay.
So when I got to part 3, I was just like, maybe not.
Can I just say one thing before you move on to that? The character, so when you said I follow a character, I realized that in this book, I did follow a character. So another thing I went into it differently than any time I've read it too, is understanding the idea of magic and what it means for Black diaspora to have this spiritual magical essence that's just given to us just by our very nature and birth. And so what I didn't really understand or know about that lens when reading the book the other time. And so this time I looked for the magic. I looked for when is this, well, magic is real to me, but I was looking more so for the moments in which this is clearly magical thing that's happening and not like an imagination and not something like, oh, that's probably theoretical. No, this probably happened. And it's like that whole scene in the forest. I'm sure we'll get there. But I read it this time and like instead of thinking, what's this crazy woman doing? And I was like, oh my God, all that magic in that place, in that whole passage was like a ritual chant. And I loved it this time in a way I could not appreciate it before.
Yeah, I was very confused. I know you get here too, but I was confused by the so when the word spreads of who's in Ceph's house towards the end, I was confused by like their reaction to it. Like I expected them to come with like I didn't expect them to take it. I expected those church folk to be like, this is like not true, or like this
Oh.
doesn't happen, but they were very much so with the shits, like, okay, we know we gonna get the spirit out this house. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just expected them to be way more just like calling this like blasphemous, because Denver didn't even tell her the truth, right? Like she told her it was some cousin. And
So who you mean, that the teacher lady?
Janie,
Yeah.
when she talked to her about it, she didn't even tell
Yeah.
her the truth. She said it was some cousin in her house, but Janie knew.
I mean, because everybody knew. That's why they stopped going to the house. They already knew it was a ghost. They just knew that Denver was lying to save face.
And that it just like I was just like, Black people are just so cool. Like we're just so fucking cool because we are just with the shits.
Well, I don't know, and I don't ever remember picking this up specifically in the book, but again, one of the analysis I read said that the townspeople knew when old master came back to get the kids. The townspeople knew he was there and didn't tell her.
Oh, and didn't tell her. Right. I did pick that up in the book and didn't tell her.
So they not dope. I mean, this is definitely, in my opinion, this is definitely a story about how like everybody is healing from the consequences of slavery. And so they knew that man was there. They knew that she had just got back. They did not warn her. They are contributors to this ghost death. So I think that they showed up knowing, because they knew what they contributed to, and why wouldn't the baby come back?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't the baby come back and haul everybody who walks past the house and who in the house? So I think I don't give them that grace, to be honest. They weren't there to be helpful. They were there to atone for their own sin.
And get it, because they just wanted to wash their hands of it too. I see it. I didn't grow up in a community like this. Like, and I know it has its flaws, right? But how, like, at the end of the day, like, when Denver needed help, like, they still helped her. Like, I didn't know my neighbors like that. There was only one time in my life where I knew my neighbors enough to do something like that in a Black town that I lived in and actually grew up in with my best friend Kelly for a little bit. But like, I guess I just got so emotionally attached to this community. Like, they have their flaws, but they still were so like down to help, even though they didn't have anything.
I feel you. I don't know. I don't see it that way this time. I don't, and I still don't think I ever saw it that way. They were down to help some 20 years later, after the house was disheveled. She by herself, her two boys done ran away. The grandmama done died out of depression. They done left them alone to fend by themselves. Like,
but okay, so yes, and do you not think that Seth had anything to do with that though? Because when the grandmother died, I mean, here's the thing though. If I went to jail and everybody in my community was talking shit about me, I wouldn't be nice to them either. So no, I take that back, actually. Okay, let's talk about the characters.
Okay.
All right, okay. Who is Seth? Tell me who Seth is.
She the mama. I think she has a really interesting, like, to me, she is the mother of these 4 children, one of which she successfully killed in an attempt to save them from slavery. She's also tends to be like the only woman and or young woman and kind of sister to this plantation filled of men. She herself is the daughter of an enslaved woman who killed all of her children but her. Um, she is a runaway. She is a freed woman. She's haunted.
She's lonely.
She's lonely.
Mm-hmm.
She might be a little insane. I still haven't quite figured out. Like she just insane a little bit.
I think, and rightfully so. She's
And
been
rightfully so. Right. Rightfully so.
okay. Yeah, she's been through a hell of a lot. So I'm gonna jump around a little bit because I can't introduce Seeds without talking about Sweet Home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in my head, like that, well, no, that's kind of where her story begins. Like once you, because she doesn't really talk about too much before that. Um, so can we talk about Sweet Home and how Sweet Home was in Alfred, Georgia, and it was a plantation. But if we could rank plantations, I even hate to say it was better, because what is better slavery? It wasn't as brutal, I guess, in the beginning. Sweet Home was uh God, how do you, it's so, I'm having so much like internal struggle right now trying to get my wording right, because
Why?
I can't say that it was a safer environment for slaves, or can I? Can I say that?
I don't know. I guess you can.
Because slavery is fucked up no matter how good your master was.
Yeah.
Like, but Sweet Home wasn't as violent of a plantation as other ones in the beginning of this story.
I mean, I don't know if I would say it wasn't as violent. I think we have slowly over time eroded what we define as being violent. I think to be enslaved and sold to a place like that at the age of 13 is enough violence to ruin anybody's life.
Mm.
So it
Pulling
don't
them away
matter.
from their families and like,
Yeah. Anything else outside of that, being ripped away and sold and forced to work without getting every single dollar or profit or product from what you created is violent. It starts off with violent, it just is violent.
yeah. I guess I wanted to preface it like that because there is like a drastic turn that Sweet Home takes when um the original owner of the plantation, Mr. Gardner, dies of a stroke.
Yeah.
And then it's now ran by School Teacher, which is their new master, who is the brother-in-law of the mistress.
Is it really a drastic turn though? Like they were legit fucking cows. Like it wasn't drastic. I think it manifested differently to me. It
Mm.
no longer was this invisible cloak that hung over them. It was now a very obvious one in the form of a white man.
Yeah, and you know what? It's so interesting that you put it that way, because Paul D explains it like sort of like that towards the end of the book. Like, was it better? Like
Right. Especially
the
when they had choice. I think that's why for me I can't land on like was it better than any other plantation? Anytime one's choice is stripped away, like you don't compare bads to bads.
you
It just
can't, right? It's bad.
it's just bad.
Like it's just bad.
Ain't no better bad.
Ain't exactly, ain't no better bad. Steve ends up at Sweet Home. She sold the Sweet Home when,
Yeah.
as a teenager.
Yeah.
Like we said, it was a male-dominated plantation with Paul A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I thought that was super.
Sixo.
What'd you
I
say?
really love Sixo and
And
Sixo.
Sixo was a
Something about Sixo, I really like. I would probably want to be with Sixo.
right. He seems like crazy. Like
Yeah.
I hear you, but like I'm leaving to go see my girlfriend.
Yes. Could never get
Another
the timing
plantation.
right. Could never leave in enough time to get there and actually spend time with her. always was off.
Right. His mission was always to go get some ass. And it was just something that was so honest about that. And I
And
was
7
like,
0.
7-0 as he's being burned at the stake. He just knew it was a matter of time before this shit hit the fan.
Yeah, yeah.
He did. So C has to choose who's going to be her husband. And she chooses Hal out of the other, 6 men that are there?
5. Yep.
Yep. And then she
Five of them.
ends up having 4 kids with this
Yeah.
guy. 3 of which are born. 1 is in her belly at the time that she decides to run.
Yeah.
Should we talk about the other characters on the plantation before we move on to C's story?
I mean, I just really like 6-0.
I love him too.
I mean, Paul D, we know we're gonna talk about him later because he's a very interesting character.
Yeah, we don't know too much about the other Pauls.
No, just that he was separated and that they actually were his brothers. Or at least he talks about them as if whether they're his blood brothers or not. We don't know.
Right.
What about the woman, the master's wife, who like gave her the crystal earrings and, oh, you're so sweet, child, when she asked to be married and wanted to know if she was gonna get a ceremony or something?
Yeah.
She's interesting.
Mistresses are interesting to me in general. Like any slave type of story or narrative that I read, like even in Kindred, if I could compare her to the mistress in Kindred,
She's evil.
Terrible, fucking
Evil.
spiteful.
Evil.
Yeah, this one.
She's not evil, at least, no.
No, I mean, you have to have some kind of evil in you if you can own people, right? And when you think about the rights that women had during this time too, like the only reason why school teacher came to that plantation is because she couldn't have it by herself as a woman.
She didn't feel comfortable. And they even alluded that at one point in one of the books, I can't remember where I said it, but it was like she just didn't want to be the only white woman there.
Or the white yeah, exactly. She would be the
white
person on there. That plantation. Right. And so she needed a man.
Right. 6-0 might have been the one to break free and got everybody. And clearly, Paul D has it in him to try to kill folks too, because that's what ended him up in the chain gang to begin with. So maybe eventually.
I can't wait till we get to there because I was very confused by Paul D's story. And maybe it's because I was just like very uninterested in Paul D because I just judged them a lot until the end.
Oh,
wow, he really redeemed himself with me.
What was it that you were judging him? Like, I guess what are you expecting? If there's no women around, that's part of what. So they were only doing what they were like bred to do.
So that's not what made me judge him. But to Paul D, I didn't judge him, his character, because of his circumstance on the plantation. I didn't start judging his character until his ass showed up at 124. So we just introduced you to a lot of the happenings on the Sweet Home Plantation, and you got to know a few of the background characters that add context to Seath and Paul D's stories. Coming up, we'll be diving more into Paul D's background, and you'll meet Denver, which is the only child that's currently living with Seath, and eventually we'll meet Beloved. Now, Beloved was portrayed in the film way differently than how she actually came across on the page for me. In the book, she was way more magical. And I know I keep saying magic over and over in this, but that is honestly the theme of this book. And in case you missed it, Beloved is actually the child who Seath successfully killed when her former master was coming to bring her back to the plantation. And so Beloved becomes this ghost, if you will, haunting the ladies in 124, and later Paul D. Denver doesn't like Paul D, and honestly at this point in the book I didn't either, but we later see how much of a major role he really plays into tying in this entire story. something in me was just like, this is just some wandering man. Papa was a rolling stone. He just sweeping through town, and he just seeing somebody who he once knew before. Because before, I think even before he got to 124, we learned that he had come from Delaware.
Mm-hmm. Or at least at one point had been in Delaware.
Right, or had been in Delaware and was shacked up with some other lady.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, he's just scheming. He just come down here, he gonna shack up with her too until he get what he want, then he's gonna take off. That's what I just kept. That's what I like. I was just like, oh, please don't come in and ruin what they got going on. Like, she been through enough. She don't need this.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I sensed him more of like, to be very honest, the things that I read was like, oh, what joy it must be to be able to walk around and go wherever you want to go freely and have sex with whomever you want, and not because you under contract or you got to produce money for it. And none of these, he ain't forced himself on nobody. Every single one of these women wanted him in their bed. And then he left and went to the next one. Like, no one else was complaining. So I was like, oh, he must be free. Like, what type of freedom is that to have?
And so I didn't think about until you said that. I didn't think about that because, like, he's never been able to do this before in his life. And now he really has the freedom to go anywhere that he wants to go, and like live any life that he wants to live. And like we learned, yeah, exactly. And we learned later in the book that he was in the military for a little bit. And
both sides though. So that's where I judged him. I'm like, okay, homie.
Like opportunist much? Like what?
Now that, yes.
Yeah. Like, but like, no, I was really like hard pressed on like, nah, he ain't it at all. Denver is right. The way that she sniffed his ass out as soon as he showed up. Denver was on point. I kept saying, and I was just like, yeah, Denver, keep being snarky while you're at the carnival with this man who you don't know laying up with your mom, who's supposed to be your dad's friend. But were they friends? They were just on the same plantation, Ashley. Like,
okay, so can I tell you how I felt about him?
Yeah.
So now, aside from what I already said, some of these pieces that you're talking about, like again though, this time I was looking for the magic, like, because I had read and understood Toni Morrison to practice magic. And so I'm like, and it's all in her books, and I never knew before in reading them. So now when I have an opportunity, I'm like, let me look for this magic now that I know I can be able to see it a little bit now. So for me, what I noted was that he was free and he felt his freedom and he executed his freedom. That's powerful to me. So that's the first thing. Then it's like, he said himself, whenever we did get to hear him, he was finding himself being drawn back to 124. So that's the first part of magic that I saw in this, aside from the actual ghost baby, right? But
are you saying like love magic? Like someone was doing a love spell to pull him in?
I didn't know. I didn't know. And I still don't know. But what the pieces were is that the grandma was clearly the matriarch of not only that family, but that community, and had a great sense of power. He was at one point, I'm sure, in the vicinity of her and knew about that family, which is why he knew where to go, right? So I figured there was a drawing in that. Then he got there, and all the people that have either been around that house or in that house have never been able to cast that baby out. And he did. Mm-hmm. So that was like, okay, not only did he just pop up, and now he's able to do something that no one else did. He sensed her walking through the threshold. He's like, whoa. I thought you said baby sugar died peacefully. Like he could sense things that no one else could. I also felt there was a sense of petulance about Denver to me. Like she felt stunted or something. So while I heard her like annoyance about him, I ain't giving no thought. It's like, girl, stop being a brat.
You're 18.
Like, come on. So and then as he like, especially as he kept saying he felt himself being drawn to different rooms, and it wasn't because he wanted to go, but he was like being moved more and more away from Steve, as like he was trying to like sleep, basically. That was like another like, how much in control of himself is he? Made me wonder.
Mm.
So I always, and I'm still trying to figure him out a little bit. Like at the end, like, are they together? Are they not? Could he like overcome all that and be with her? Like, I just, I still am a little, he's still a big question for me, and no judgment. Just like, he is a fact, a person that existed, and I don't understand him quite yet.
Yeah, I would say at the end of the book, it wasn't until the end of the book that I realized how important he was.
Yeah.
And I think to your question, like, are they together? In my head, I don't think they're together romantically, but I think that they're forever bound by their experience. And so then
Mm-hmm.
he just feels like not obligated, but obligated to like be with her, to be there for her and take care of her. Just like he said, I'll be here with you at night while Denver's with you in the morning. Also, to Denver, she was very stunted. First of all, it wasn't until like in the middle of the book, I'm just like, wait, she's like 18, like 17, 18 years old, and she ain't never left the house.
12 years. In 12 years, she ain't left that house until she went to Jane. What's her name? Jane,
Janie.
Amy.
But it was, I think it was only because of her mother. Seath wanted to protect her as much as possible. In my head, like, she done been through so much. Like, she done lost 3 of her kids. 2 of them ran away from her. One of them she killed successfully, was very intentional about it, but she was forever like burdened with that baby's ghost in that house. Like that baby's ghost in the house was for her. Like in my like, that's my interpretation. Like that baby was there with her because that baby always wanted to be with her and felt neglected since the very beginning. And Beloved says that like towards the end of the book, like she's just like, since you sent me off,
Yeah.
you didn't run away with me.
Yeah. Because she ain't know. She was a young spirit, didn't understand. But I think Denver stayed around. I mean, again, looking through the magic lens, that was a binding spell between Denver and the baby, already crawling baby, question mark. Because when she was breastfeeding Denver, after she had slit the baby's throat, the blood and the milk mixed up. So I think Denver stayed stunted. She could only grow as far as the baby could grow until the baby manifested into a human and no longer she was tied to her spiritually. But until she manifested in like physical form, she was binded to the spirit.
Yeah, that is so true because she took some of her sister's blood with her mother's milk. And that is a spell. Wow, look at you, Morghan. See, I knew this was such a great idea. You be knowing, and I didn't know that Toni Morrison practiced magic, but it makes sense.
I mean, I really, what I hear, what I read, and I don't know a lot about it quite yet, but apparently it's written all in a lot of her stuff. And this is just the first book that I've gone back to reread to actually find it. I can think of all the other books, like in every book she writes, there's a sense of spiritual or magic in there, like something you just don't understand where it came from or why. So it's like, okay, this makes sense now. There's always just like a sense of magic, and this time I was looking for it, so that's why I was like, oh, no wonder why this girl won't leave.
In the beginning of Paul D and Beloved's spiritual relationship, like when it's the baby ghost before she manifests into like Beloved, the human, the spirit in the human's body, aren't we all? I don't know. Anyway, I digress. But like, he was able, like you said, to scare Beloved off.
I think he was able to cast it out. I don't think he was able to scare it off.
Scare it off, cast it out. Cast it off, right? And then but then when Beloved, the person, comes into the picture, do you think the reason why would you say that he became bound to Beloved because of sex magic then?
So for me, and this is not knowing the rules, I don't think she could be practicing sex magic because she's not a vessel. She's just a spirit who happens to be able to form a physical body, but that's why it was able to just disappear because it's just not attached to a vessel. It's just a spirit.
Just a spirit who took over a shell.
I don't think she took over a shell because a shell has to go somewhere. Like a physical shell has to decompose.
And so that made me think that she took over the body of that missing woman who was that.
Yep, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right. Yep. So she found a shell. She did. Yes, she found a vessel. And then so I don't think it was sex magic. All this to say, I think it was some magic, but I don't think it was sex magic.
So what do you think that was then? Like, why did she want Paul D to touch her on the inside parts? And then in my head, she was pregnant by him. No?
In my mind too. They never said it, but in my mind too. I think so. The larger piece that we haven't really talked about is like how this story is metaphorical about like the consequences of slavery and how it impacts and it creates trauma and it haunts you. And if it's not extinguished, it can birth something new. So I think her being the spirit or the consequence, the residual energy left over from slavery in this particular family, then has sex with this man in this vessel. And I think it could have had the opportunity if birthed, if the community hadn't come up and said, we're banding with you instead of letting you do this alone in the way that we caused this. We allowed that to happen a long time ago. We're going to ban this out before the birth of this kid. And I think if that kid had been born, then it would have caused destruction. So I think, yes, she was pregnant, but I don't think the pregnancy, I think it's like almost, what is it with Daredevil when you step in and out of the fourth wall?
I don't
when
know.
You're breaking the fourth wall.
Oh, when you break the fourth wall and you're talking to the people on the other. Yeah.
So I wonder if this is like a literary version of breaking the fourth wall, where it's like that pregnancy doesn't have anything to do with the story itself that was playing out. I feel like it's more of a message to the reader, like us right now, like we going back and forth between being in the story and applying it to real life. And that if that pregnancy births something, then it could be much worse and much more evil than what we ever came from. So we need to do everything. Community got to come together
at this moment.
That shit out.
Yeah.
Before it can even come earthside.
Ooh. Yo, that is such a word. When you think about what could happen or what could be birthed into the universe if you do not get your shit together, that just hits a little differently for me. Okay, so I'm really supposed to be using this time to dive into the comments on our social media platforms from those who have read Beloved. So the first comment I'm going to read is from Instagram, and it comes from V Friday V, who says, "So true. I love Toni Morrison's authorship. She truly encapsulates the plight of the Black woman and somehow generates restoration and hope in each text. Check out Song of Solomon next." And I cannot believe I have not read Song of Solomon yet, but best believe it is on my to be read list. Our next comment was also on Instagram, and it comes from user litstars.nyc, and they write, "Beloved changed my life." Me too, girl. Me too. And our last comment comes from Twitter from the user Carmen D. Harris and the number 1. And they write, "Finished on Monday. I was left breathless and without words till Tuesday morning during my time with my therapist. Every other sentence started with, 'So in Beloved,' or 'This reminds me of the moment in Beloved when,' and then to her therapist, Carmen says, she met every one of my insides." Oof. I'm telling you, anyone who picks up Beloved for the first time, like, it's going to change your life. And I say that with no bias. Okay, now back to the episode.
I think the pregnancy was symbolic for birthing Devin, being released and unbinded. I think it's Cece, I don't even know how to pronounce the name, but
I just said,
her being able to like have her breakdown for real, instead of this hiatus of a breakdown, like a real, and I mean like hit rock bottom.
yeah, because that fine line, she was like teetering. Like she exiled herself from her entire community. Okay. She kept her daughter in the house, which is like, that's like traumatic too. Like, you probably scared her half to death and made her think the outside world wasn't going to do anything but harm her,
Yep.
you know? And then as soon as you see Mr. Bodwin, who you know who Mr. Bodwin is.
But
Like,
you
at
can't
least
not.
I believe you
Yeah.
know who Mr. Bodwin is because you're living in his fucking house. And he's
Hello.
the reason why you got out of jail, apparently. You try to kill him because you see him coming up with the wagon and you think he's a slave master trying to take your kid. Like, girl, you needed to deal with yourself a long time ago.
But you know, one of the analysis I read, which was super dope about that scene when she was going after him, is that at least though she went after the right thing. She didn't go after the kid. She didn't turn around and try to kill Beloved again, and she didn't
Right.
try to kill Devin. She went after the thing that actually was the threat. So that
So,
actually is almost like a
do you think, okay, yes, I agree with you, but can we really call it the right thing though? Because then by calling that the right thing, we're saying that her killing her children was wrong, or trying to kill her children was wrong. Let's just say when I read the foreword, I did not judge that mother who
yeah,
this is like
yeah,
inspired by, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
did not at all.
yeah,
Because I would not want my kid to go through those same horrors either. And
right,
like, Seith was talking about how like she's been scathed, but her children haven't, like not by that, like,
right.
she's been tainted but they haven't, not by that, and that's what made her the proudest. So can we call it?
That's a really good question. Because I don't, when I say that, when I say doing the right thing, in my mind doesn't feel like she did the wrong thing, but I can see how using those words does kind of like hold them in comparison to one another. I guess maybe I say she channeled the energy in a more productive direction.
I like that, yeah, because when I saw that I was just like, hell yeah, girl. But at the same time I'm like, girl, it ain't him.
It's misdirected. It's, you gotta work it through. We gotta, one step closer.
He's a white man in a wagon and she just went after his ass.
So it's still definitely misdirected. Like the first time was misdirected, and that time was misdirected. But I also think about when you're traumatized, like when you're literally in crisis, she could only do what she could control, and what she could control was them kids, because that came from her body. Because it's already been proven that by the fact that she was raped and her milk sucked from her, that she's not in control of anything once this white man comes into the picture. So how could she think she could kill him
If it came down to it.
yeah, so I gotta kill them because I can't kill him.
Yeah, she was complicated so much for me because I was just rooting for her the whole time, and I was just so happy for her when Beloved came. The antennas didn't go off, Morgan. I'm just reading it and I'm just like, yes, let them live peacefully forever with her baby. Like, it's just me. And then when Beloved switched up, it was acting real foolish and abusive to see. I was very confused.
Because I like the weird stuff and the mysticism of all genres. There's a tale in vampire literature, like baby vampires are actually the worst because they're turned demons at a young age, even if they're in grown bodies or strong bodies as strong as adult bodied vampires. Their minds, they're just, I need right now. Everything they want is insatiable. Like they are forever
like
wanting.
Twilight.
Yeah.
When they
first
transition, they always needed that and they couldn't fight that urge.
They could not stop. Right.
Whoa.
So if we compare that to Beloved, I never, like, that's dangerous. The child was tearing down the house as a spirit.
I was just like, she just wanted to be with her mom and she just wanted to hug her mom, but she wanted to, in my head, this is how I justified it, Morghan. This spirit just wants to be hugged and like coddled and cradled by her mother.
At any point, she could have done that.
And when she finally did, and she was just so like just happy and childlike, and like I was just like, this is gonna work out until it didn't.
But when was she? I guess I want to understand from you. It was very quickly when they ended up back in the forest and she strangled her mother. Like, it wasn't a lot of childness and happiness and playfulness before that. It was just a lot of questions.
In my head, she made a mistake and then she tried to fix it by kissing her mother's neck.
Okay.
I told you I have to attach myself to these characters and always hope for the best for them. And like, I was just like, damn, she just made a mistake, but it's okay because Denver is going to bring her back to earth. She's going to be the one to like ground her. And I guess it kind of happened. No, Denver was the one who grounded. Denver was the one who really like rebirthed herself.
Denver sought out her ancestors. She called on her grandma and said, Grandma, I'm gonna need you to guide me.
Yeah. Okay. Baby Shugs. And how each time, well, just about every time she was mentioned in the book, they say Baby Shugs, comma, holy. Mm-hmm. To me, it let me know that this woman was touched. Mm-hmm. This woman had it. That magical touch. She was not ordained as a preacher. Mm-hmm. She ain't in nobody's pulpit. She went to the clearing. Mm-hmm. All of her words, they were preached, if you will, in an open space, and people would come and be joyous. Mm-hmm. And even her house, like people just came and they just felt so much love and warmth there. And like that, I think losing that for Seath also started to make her tip off of the edge because well, okay, so when did the downturn happen for Seath though?
The moment she killed her baby, had to go to jail with Denver on her booty.
I mean, not Seath. I'm sorry, Baby Shugs, because
the moment stopped. When she killed.
Okay, yes, yeah. So she did stop preaching as soon as that happened.
Yeah. And I think so. This is a couple of reasons what I think has happened in that space. I think. Now, again, this is after reading some analysis of like the larger. One thing is that so the community knew that the man was there. So they had already started to get jealous, especially after she did that.
Had that party
and the food just kept going. It's like, where's this food coming from, right? So it turned from them accepting the magic to questioning the magic and being jealous of the magic. And then they knew that this man was here. They didn't warn her, right? So all that energy and that touch that you described, I think it did follow her, and it followed into that house, and it itself was its own being. And I wonder now, I didn't think about this before, but now you saying that makes me wonder if beloved isn't actually the returned child, but it's the opposite of that love and community. It's the selfish, bratty individualness, revenge that took its place, because Baby Shug's energy came from the community. She had that magic when she was on the plantation.
No, right
there. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, or it manifested itself there. And so I wonder if the haunted house is the opposite of what that house was when community was around it and was there and supported each other.
So I have to wrap my mind around that. Take a second, because to me, then that messes up the whole entire book for me. Not messes it up in a bad way, but like changes my interpretation of the book, right? Because in my head, the story works because they're trying to deal with the sins of Seath.
Yeah, I never saw it as the sins of Seath necessarily. I felt like it's the sins of slavery, because everybody's story is intertwined and it all goes back to slavery. Like even as they talk about like all of her, when she go, well, we don't know when she's in current or when she's back. It takes a minute before you're like in a constant flow of consciousness, when you realize like, oh, we're not even talking about now anymore. We talking back back when she was back in Sweet Home. So I wonder if it's all just symbolism for slavery.
Okay. But yes, and if it were symbolism for slavery, I mean, with this community who's been affected by it the most and took the grunt of it, would they be dealing with a lot of these ills then? Would they be on the other side of the ills, or should the white people be on the other side of the ills?
Well, I think that's what's interesting is like when a negative energy, when something as horrible as slavery happens, it comes together and it becomes a life of its own, right? And that life becomes whatever it wants. It's like literally like humans, right? That energy is so intoxicating in a good place when you're not like molested or taken advantage of or raped, right? That energy of two people coming together creates this wonderful being that's altogether different than the two things it came from. Mm-hmm. And then it creates more beings that are altogether different than the two things it came from and the thing it came with to create, you know? So I wonder if like if beloved is just a manifestation of all that energy that at one point lived in the house, and then Paul D cast it out, and then it found a spot in a vessel in a woman that was drowning, or it drowned a woman and took her vessel. We all know which way that we all know. So I wonder if like that was just this family's manifestation, a family full of clearly magical people would manifest some magical shit when you don't deal with it correctly.
Yes. Okay. Also, that's naive Ashley saying like, but they were the good people. They were the good people, you know? And it's just like, it's just all so very complicated.
Yeah.
It's me again. I'm popping in to let you know that the episode's running a little bit long, so I unfortunately had to cut out some of Morgan and I's conversation, especially when it came to characters Stampede, who is the unofficial mayor of the town, and Amy Denver, who is Seath's saving grace and gave her the motivation to make it to 124. I am considering releasing these clips though, just so you guys can hear us gab about them because they meant so much to the story as well. All right, now back to the episode. What would you tell people about this book? Why should they read it, Morgan?
Why should they read it?
Yeah.
I think one reason why to read it is one, it's an intellectual exercise. I think we are so conditioned to being able to read things that are clear cut, and you can agree, or you can place clear judgment and have a clear stance on what it's about and what it was created for. And this is a book, and the way she writes it practices critical thinking. It practices all the things that we would need in order to actually be able to accept all humans as humans. I think the trick, what this book, what her literature does, is it pushes it up in your face. Like she will put the thing that's like ill in all of her books, right? And then she forces you to contend, is it really ill though? Because in the case of like them having sex with the cows, they could have raped her back to back together.
Could have.
And they didn't. They actually make the conscious decision not to, right? So like it makes you contend with like these very real realities that it might not be in our day and age. It might not be the decision between rape and having sex with a cow, but it is the decision between, am I going to choose to continue to put my money in this place knowing that they're doing these things to people versus maybe getting a different product or accepting a different service in lieu of the greater good versus my immediate gratification. And I think it also, that piece when they're in the clearing and was it Baby Shugs, and she's out there and she's just like, children laugh, let your parents hear you laugh. And I read one line in that scene over and over again. That just, well, it did stick to me, but now I lost it. But basically, it's like you gotta love you, because that's all you got, right? And that's how the book ended too. What you mean you lost your best thing? You are your best thing.
You are it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that theme that came all around throughout it. I mean, I think that's a beautiful lesson, not just in like what she had in that clearing, the men dancing, whatever. She had to switch roles too. It's appropriate for men to cry. It could be healing. It could be a healing book of what it looks like in the midst of everything going wrong, to acknowledge that. And that's going to sit with me for a while. I did not get that from this before, but you are all you got and you are your greatest thing. That, if we can accept that, then the power that exudes just from believing that, you can't stop that power.
Morghan is so fucking cool. I can honestly listen to her talk about this shit for days upon days. If you too were enamored by her, you can totally follow her on Instagram at MorghyM. That's Morghie and the letter M. You can follow Books We Should Have Read on Instagram at Books We Should Have Read and Twitter at BooksWSR to stay up to date with the latest BWSR happenings. And if you're interested in being a part of the official book club discussion, be sure to join our private Facebook page, which is linked on our website and social media accounts. Sign up for our newsletter to get exclusive book club info and to get hip to some new and up-and-coming Black authors. And lastly, to enter our monthly raffle for a $50 gift certificate to a Black-owned bookstore. Our next book is Sula, also written by Toni Morrison, and that episode, featuring Kelly, who is my best friend since I was 7 years old, releases February 16th. This podcast was produced and edited by me, Ashley Ray, and the dope-ass track you hear in the background was produced by Ty.2wo. That's Ty. The number 2, the letters W-O on Instagram. Oh, and if you love what you hear and you feel compelled to contribute to the podcast financially, you can do so by clicking the Anchor link in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Until next time. Bye, y'all.